The smaller the garden, the more inventive, creative and bold you need to be.
Pick up tips on unusual plants, drainage and horticultural recycling from plant and garden design expert Mona Abboud, and discover how she turned an overgrown, unfaceable jungle into a multi-zoned exotic garden.
Chelsea, smoke and mirrors. You couldn't have found your grandmother in there, it was such a mess. The mother of all shredders, don't ever plant a Kiftsgate. That's my advice. I spend the whole summer, forget about going on a holiday, at the end of a hose, I'm afraid. Pseudopanat is amazing. It's architectural, in your face. I'm telling you all this because later on, I'm going to try and encourage you to try out some of these crazy things. Would you believe that's Moscow? It's my pleasure now to introduce Mona Abboud. Thank you. Thank you, Judith. Yes, it was lovely to welcome her. And I'm so happy to see you tonight. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for asking me. So the talk is going to be, I've made a decision this morning. The talk is going to be in two halves. One half is to talk about my existing garden, very little, and more importantly, my new acquired garden, the acquisition of it and the development of it. But that can get a bit boring because obviously, you know, this sort of project is not just not for the faint-hearted, but it is specifically for the certifiable. And as none of you, I'm sure, are certifiable, I think a nice thing to do in the second half is for me to extract from my experience the things that might be interesting to you and valuable to you. So here we go. So this is my existing garden, which I started in the year 2000. And it was just a blank canvas. You will see that in a moment. And as I announced before, and as Judith announced, I am the proud national collection holder of this plant that nobody cares about and nobody knows about, called Corokia, which is a New Zealand plant. However, I think I'm doing it an injustice because the RHS have been using it in both at RHS Wisley and at RHS Hyde Hall, if you have the opportunity to go there. And unfortunately, the ones at RHS Wisley in the alternative to box trial within the walled garden, they have perished because it's a frost pocket in the infamous 22-23 winter. However, all the other ones survive, and I'm glad to say all of mine survived. So it's definitely a good plant for London. And hot off the press, on the 15th of November, I had the visit of my all-time horticultural hero called Matt Pottage. He was the curator at Wisley for many, many years. He's very young, still in his early 40s, but what that man doesn't know about plants from all over the world isn't worth knowing, I can tell you that. And he's been my all-time hero, and I've been begging him to come and visit my garden for years. So finally, God descended upon my garden on the 15th of November, and he was so complimentary, and he said such nice things about my garden and the plants. He said it was a masterclass of cloud pruning, that the plants were extraordinary, that, you know, I mean, he just went on and on and on. So I really feel very honored. I feel after, well, you can see from my hair, 25 years of blood, sweat and tears, I got finally the only recognition that really mattered. I mean, of course, it's nice to have compliments from anyone, but that was the high point. So this is my existing garden. The famous Corokia, or infamous Corokia, whichever you want to look at it. So as you can see, it's much more interesting than box. because that's only two examples. I have about 40 different varieties. But you see, I'm not going to talk about Corokia because that's a talk for another time, if you'll have me again, and if you're interested. But you see, they flower, they come in different colors. This one called Cocoa goes completely bronze in the winter. So what's not to like? Much nicer than box. Now, this is my garden. So all this is my existing garden up to here. And this is the subject of our talk, the new acquisition, the new extension, which is also the subject of my new book. When I said it was only for the certifiable, I was not joking. This is what I acquired. I mean, look at my look of horror. I mean, brambles and ivy and, well, unspeakable. Dilapidated greenhouse. I mean, that bit there had already been partially cleared, so you can imagine what it was like before. And the previous owner had some strawberries in mesh and all the contraptions for protecting it. So that was amazing because all these prickly plants had to be dug up, all the supports had to be dug up, all the mesh needed to be disposed of. And what I forgot to tell you, which is the cherry on the cake, is that I have no access, except from the road, 100 yards down an alleyway. And so in my previous garden, in order to plant all the exotic and Mediterranean plants that I wanted to plant, I had to import, don't faint, 300 tons of material down the alleyway and into the garden. So at this advanced age, I decided I'm not doing this anymore. So it has been, I mean, you know, necessity is the mother of invention, they say. It has been a masterpiece of recycling. I've recycled everything. We'll come to that soon.
Could you show us the access in that previous slide? Could you show us where the access was?
So that's the neighbor's garden, right? So the access is here. And then it goes in, you know, you've got a gate here and a gate there.
Mona, could you explain that your house
That's
is
my
on the
house.
far left-hand side, and then you go
That's my
down the
house.
steps. It's quite a steep garden going downwards.
Well, the garden isn't steep, it's just that you've got a few steps to come down into the garden.
Yeah.
Right? So so that's my neighbor's house, as you can see, and that's the alleyway. Not that it's very, and these are tennis courts. So this is an alleyway that goes from Wood Vale, where I live, down to Park Road, and that is the only access for all the 300 tons of stuff that came into the first garden. I was determined I wasn't going to do this again. So we go back to the horrors. The neighbor did leave the logs of an old eucalyptus tree, and to my delight, suddenly sprung a ginkgo. And then there was the neighbor had this land for 60 years. So I did inherit a few nice mature trees. So here you've got a very nice maple. So that was the halfway point. Most of it had been cleared. So this is the new garden here, there. And this is still part of the existing garden, right? So they really do join. So, yes. Cautionary tale. Before I even knew that I was going to acquire the new land, I wanted to block the neighbor because, as you can see, his garden was nothing to look at, and I just didn't want to have to look at it. So in order to block it even more, I mean, talk about kamikaze. What did I plant? The most thuggish rose known to man, woman, and beast. Kiftsgate. That's Kiftsgate. Well, of course, when it bloomed, something like 20 meters and 30 meters wide, and branches. Can you see the branches there? They're so thick. I mean, most of the branches were 10 meters. So that was when, you know, I was blocking the neighbor and I was enjoying the wonderful blooming in June. However, when I acquired the place, it wasn't so desirable anymore, was it? So it had to be, this is a 4-meter ladder, and my gardener and I, he was up there, being 6'3", and I was down there, being 5' nothing, cutting bits, you know, and then, you know, disposing of them. It took us a week, 5 hours a day, to get rid of it. Don't ever plant a Kiftsgate. That's my advice. So I started piling. So this was the boundary of my new plot, and these three, you see these three conifers. I'm not a great fan. They're the sort of Lelandiae type that nobody wants. So they were felled in order to produce logs and shredding. We'll come to that. And this pile was going to be where my new prairie was going to, where I was going to plant a new prairie. So I put all the things that I cut, you know, a lot of brambles, ivy, branches of dead trees, and a lot of, you know, cutting of unruly shrubs. All this came onto this pile. You see, that was quite brutal what we had to do. That's a Portuguese laurel, and this is a cotoneaster. And we hacked them absolutely. I mean, they were enormous, probably 30 years old. So we had to really hack them quite brutally. And then the floods arrived. So the only way to get from A to B were using old planks to try and hopscotch, you know, from one bit to the other. And then came the ceremonial burning. I was environmentally very conscious. I did that at 6 o'clock in the morning, and everything was super dry, so half an hour, everything gone. Wonderful material for the garden, of course. This was the other dilapidated greenhouse in the state of being demolished, in the process of being taken away. And then World War I. Trenches everywhere, because of course it's at the bottom of a hill. Everything is flooded. So apart from bog garden plants, nothing likes having wet feet in the winter. So I had to bring in a company to do, you know, trenches with pipes, put a sump at the bottom, and, you know, the digger. I mean, you know, it was just horrendous. When I saw this, I thought, my God, what have I done, you know? This is never going to turn into something viable. And then I thought, okay, recycling, recycling, recycling. The only way to not have to import organic matter, because of course, I'm plagued with I'm sure most of you are as well, the dreaded London clay, is to chuck as much organic matter of any kind on top of it. So I bought the mother of all shredders, as you can see, aptly called Titan, and I mean tons and tons of branches went through that and produced, as you will see, mountains of chippings. So these are the logs that were produced as a result, and more piles, and still the three awful, ghastly, horrible conifers. So this bit was where the old big greenhouse was. So once that went, I really wanted to have this as my exotic area. But as you can see, there's no way anything was going to grow in this. So I did have to give in and have only 10. Well, from 300 to 10, it's not too bad. Topsoil, import 300 tons of topsoil to cover this in order to have all my palm trees and etc. that you will see later. So this is the halfway stage. So I had put topsoil in there. This is where the prairie was going to go. This is my woodland area. And right at the end, beyond what you can see there, is an olive tree, is going to be, or is now, the exotic area, where all these piles of these 10 tons of earth came. So that was the halfway stage. We had actually cleared all the ivy, all the brambles. I mean, you have no idea. So that's the beginning of the exotic area. And the thing is, because they really don't like to have their feet in water, I use as you can see, the logs that the neighbor left behind, the eucalyptus, cut in half, and use them as frames to frame all the plants. So you've got a cordyline here, a yucca here, a wonderful thing from Mexico called the Beavoir armata. I'm telling you all this because later on I'm going to try and encourage you to try out some of these crazy things. So there's method in my madness. So this is a fantastic story. So along with all the exotic things, I had a 200-kilo olive tree delivered. So they came from Richmond, the Palm Center, and they called me 4 times the day before they were going to deliver. Are you sure somebody's going to be there to help? I mean, this had to come down the 120 yards alleyway, right? On a little contraption there. So I said, yes, my gardener will be here. So the lorry arrives, and this not so young man comes out of it and says, and gets my gardener to manhandle it. On this, I'm having a senior moment, trolley. But there's no way. I mean, getting it down the alleyway was one thing, but there's a hump coming from the gate, and it had just rained that morning, and the wheels of the trolley were sinking. But the God of Gardeners was on my side. I just had the visit, I mean, totally unexpected, of a German television lady and 2 German cameramen who wanted to see the garden with the possibility of filming it. And they came unexpectedly because they were supposed to be in Gloucestershire, but because the Queen had just died, their whole plan were in disarray, so they thought, oh, why not go and visit this lady, we've heard about her, etc. So she arrives, the lorry arrives, and there is no way that these 2 chaps could get, that's the gate, right? And look at the face, look at this poor man's face. Over the hump. So we got the 2 poor German cameramen to help out. And I tell you, needless to say, I never saw them, either of them, again. They never came back.
They did leave.
Huh?
They did leave, they weren't buried.
No, they weren't buried under the olive tree. No. Just checking. So, more burning, as you can see. You know, the mess, the burning. So that was going to be the perfect soil preparation for my prairie, right? So we've got the dreaded clay, okay? Then we have the grass, okay? Then you have that mess on top, which smothers the grass, so then the grass becomes lovely, malleable compost, right? With me so far. And then we have wonderful ash, on top of which you will see later, I have put, you know, all the leaf mold and the compost and everything. And I thought this is textbook preparation for a prairie. The best laid plans. So they went, and my two other gardeners decided that we needed to. The olive tree is not, Johnny can say, testify to it, it hasn't fared well. It got a bit flooded, it's been dug up again, etc. But, you know, because look what they do. I mean, this is really, I mean, I have so much anger against the people who sell these things. They dig them up from Italy, from Spain, from Greece, and they cut off the roots. That's all what, look at the roots. This is a 200 kilo thing. They cut off the taproot, they cut off everything, and the poor thing is supposed to survive. Plus, the floods came, which you will see in a minute. So the poor thing didn't stand a chance, so it had to be dug up and mounded. I'm praying. So there it was well, at the beginning, of course, it looked amazing. So all that shredding, at the end of the year when I acquired, in 2022 when I acquired the new land, the willow, the enormous willow that the neighbors had, was heavily pollarded because it's quite compromised, it has a hole inside it. I persuaded the neighbors to use my tree surgeon, and he said to me, well look, I know we've been working together for 20 years, I do like you a lot, but there is no way I'm going to drag all the branches to the top of the road, put them in my shredder and bring them down again as chippings. That isn't going to happen. So he used my shredder, Titan. Titan produced all this. And then the snow came. The famous 22-23 winter. I went around with the broom because, you know, all my evergreens, particularly in the previous garden, the existing garden, they really don't like the snow. Sits there and it freezes and then they burn, like we would, you know, snow in your hands. So that's what happened. And just behind the prairie, I decided to have a Mediterranean border. So that's the two cypresses, and there's a lot of, I'm not going to name you all the crazy Mediterranean things I have there, but they're supported by the logs that have been cut down from the conifers and the willow. So everything recycled, right? The floods. More pipes we had to put in, my gardener and I. You know, it really felt like the Battle of the Somme, you know, mud up to here. The wellies didn't quite cope. And then, so one of the important reasons, one of the main reasons why I wanted this new land, and one was that I was going to bequeath it to a gardening charity, thereby has another story. But B, I wanted a huge greenhouse in which to propagate all my very unusual and crazy plants, which we haven't talked about because they're all in my existing garden. This talk is mostly about this garden, this new garden. So down the alleyway in a little choo-choo arrived it took me 6 months to find somebody who was willing. You would have thought I was trying to, you know, build the Crystal Palace or something. To build me a greenhouse and do the foundations and I wanted bricks, you know. So that happened over 3 days, you know, up and down the alleyway. All the dog owners going down, and all the ladies with their children were absolutely appalled because, you know, it was Piccadilly Circus with the bricks and the sand, etc., coming up and down that alleyway. You know, it caused quite a commotion in dear Muswell Hill. You know, and that's the finished product. So 6x3. So yeah, one can do some serious propagating in there. I used everything, including the sand they left behind, including the bricks they left behind, which I bashed, you know, to do the hardcore for the main half. And you can see that the exotic area is taking shape. Ah. The gold, the brown gold, the incredible ingredient. I use it all the time. Because of course, if your access isn't amazing and you want something that looks nice to do your drainage or to do your mulching, you need something. But you don't want tons and tons. I decided the 300 tons of soil, etc., were not going to be dragged down by wheelbarrow down the alleyway. So the solution was coir, because I told you before, the best laid plans, you know, you remember the perfect preparation for the prairie textbook, absolutely perfect, right? Remember that. Well, when the boys came with their digger to do the foundations for the new greenhouse, they had to put the soil somewhere. And there was nowhere else. They couldn't put it in the woodland because there were already things there. The only place, and they were certainly not going to take it away, absolutely not, out of the question. Even for all the Team China, they were not going to do that. So the only place it could go, guess where? Over my wonderfully prepared prairie. I mean, after all that work, back went the clay on top of it. Nearly a foot of it. That's when I really started not sleeping anymore, because I thought, okay, I want a prairie, I want it now, not next year. I don't want to import topsoil and God knows what else in order to achieve that. I had umpteen conversations with great experts who told me about this great pioneer in Sweden called Peter Korn, who actually grows everything from trees to perennials to shrubs, and has 85% success in pure sand. So he plants everything in pure sand, you know, bare rooted, and then when it, after a foot, it touches the soil. He apparently has the most wonderful success. I thought, well, yes, that would be a way forward, but we come back to the same thing. Importing sand, tons of it. So, what am I going to do? There is no way that all these lovely grasses that dear Johnny loves so much, and so do I, and all these lovely perennials, they're not going to survive in heavy clay. I know, just like Peter Korn, that a foot beyond there is that wonderful soil preparation, but until you get there, what to do? So 3 a.m., all my best ideas come to me at 3 a.m. 3 a.m. one morning, the eureka moment. Something that's light, that doesn't need to be dragged down the alleyway. You put it in a wheelbarrow, and you drown it in water, and it multiplies 7 times, and bingo, it's as good as sand, if not better, because it has that, brownie, ready, exotic look. Coir. You get it from Amazon, tons of it. So that was it. And so I recycled a lot of my perennials from the existing garden into the new one, a lot of the grasses as well. Everything was planted in coir. And
not a problem on the pH scale, you told me.
no, neutral pH. wonderful mulch, wonderful drainage, and everything. The prairie, you will see the prairie. I got my prairie. Thank you, coir. The problem was that I had a batch from Suffolk, which proved to be very recalcitrant. You used to drown it in gallons of water, and the wretched thing would not dissolve. So I got my good friend Charlie. I mean, he lost a lot of weight then, but I mean, he was chunkier. Nicknamed Hercules. And he said, so I had 15 of these blocks, and I said, Charlie, it's going to take me till doomsday to get them to disintegrate, and I need to plant my prairie now. So leave it with me. He got all the water butts out, he filled them with water, he drowned these things in there, and he started first by bashing them. I mean, he looks as if he's having a little, amble in the park there, but I can tell you, it was no joke. It was absolutely no joke. So he would fill the barrel 3, 4, 5 times, and then finally, you would get that sandy texture. So that was my wonderful preparation before it all went belly up, right? I mean, you could eat it, it's so beautiful, couldn't you? But no, it was not to be. So this is my wonderful friend who does my website and did all the graphic design and the pictures, etc. in my book. 1920s furniture, but it needed restoring, so he did that. So I wanted him to be part of it because he's part of the whole project, the book, the furniture, and we recycled the neighbor had left me with just, the metal bits. We found some slats and we restored, and he restored this as well. Recycling. The prairie was well underway. And then my gardener rang me one morning and said, look, my company, he works for me 1 day a week, but the rest of the time he works for the Garden Club London. They produce wonderful gardens throughout London, and they were doing a Mediterranean garden at Chelsea. I decided to take a break from all this sleepless nights and trot off to Italy for a week. And while I was there, the boss sent me a list of 3 pages full of plants and said, look, when Chelsea is over, we would like to donate some of these plants. Would you like some? So I sent him a list out of the 3 pages of 10 plants. I thought 10 plants will do me, that's all I need. I don't have the time nor the desire to have more than that. Particularly as I was opening my garden and this garden for the very first time ever for the famous June Open Squares and Gardens weekend from the London Trust. They open, the Inns of Court, they open the Aga Khan, they open allotments. I mean, it's been going for 100 years. So that was going to happen in a week. And so my gardener rings me 2 days when I come back from Italy later and says, the vans are on their way. I said, what do you mean the vans are on their way? I asked for 10 plants. I don't know, Mona. They're just on their way, and I am in one of them. I said, right. So an hour later, they fetch up 60 plants, all in terrible state. Because of course Chelsea had finished on Saturday, they had been left there, and it's all Chelsea, smoke and mirrors. They don't actually plant the stuff. They leave them in their pots and shove them in the earth like that. So these poor things had been in their pots since Saturday, that was Tuesday, 3 days, and the temperature for that whole week every day, all day, was 30 degrees in the shade. So you imagine the state in which they arrived, right? Absolutely, I mean, dead. And those chaps, so they fetched up in front of my house. You know, I lived in a tiny little terraced house with a tiny car in front. And I mean, literally, it's that much space between the road and my front door. And they chucked half of these 60 plants willy-nilly. And I said, but what do you want me to do with them? Lady, you've just been told we're just doing our job. And they just chucked all these things on my, front porch and disappeared. Then my gardener arrives with the second van and all the big things. At which point I was practically in tears. I thought, what more can I go through? And I said to her, Jane, this is not possible. These people are coming in 10 days. You can't leave them in the pot. Half of them look dead. What am I going to do? So he had this chunky mate of his, from Australia, and between them, 5 trips with 2 barrows down the alleyway. They brought these 60 dilapidated things, the desiccated affairs, down the alleyway, and they plunked them there. Now, they look lovely to you, don't they? That's after 3 hours and 2 days of constant watering. Most of them recovered. But then they needed to be planted. 30 degrees in the shade, 2 days, 8 hours. 3 of us. That was fun. So they all ended up mostly in the prairie. Thank you, coir, you see? It worked. So I survived the summer. The June event went well. I had 30 Austrians who also descended on me, and I had to give them a tour in German, auf Deutsch. So that went well too. That's it. So Jay and I decided that as it was the first year for these poor exotics, if we were going to have another, it was 1922, thank God, that's how they survived, because we put the tarpaulin. But then we had the storm, so the tarpaulin had to be reattached every 5 minutes. So anyway, so there we are. And so now we have the before and after. That's the before, and that's the after. Prairie! Yay! So, and this is this year. This is the hot off the press this year. And this glumping site for plants. Well, the tarpaulin didn't quite make it. They got so battered by Storm Eon and Storm Dennis and God knows how many storms. I've forgotten the names of all these horrible things. And they got shredded to pieces. So we decided that the only way to keep them safe, but to stop them flying away, was to cover them all with tents. It works. It works. And I know. And I decided if you were really going to go full on exotic, you need something that looks red, like red earth, South Africa, Australia, the south of France, Mauritius, something that screams exotic at you. So I saw on Instagram that somebody had gone and actually used crushed bricks. So that was the other only import. 1 dumpy bag of crushed bricks. So here they are. I think it works, don't you? Crushed bricks, and all my friends, including dear Sonia, who's doing the video, are donating their, excess bricks. So I'm bashing them and putting on top of that so that you can have different textures, different colors. My next door neighbor is an architect. So he gives me all the samples he has, and they all come in different shades of red. even yellow. So this is work in progress. And this is the prairie in September of this year, of last year. I keep saying this year, I don't know. I still haven't clocked that we're in 2025. This is September of 2024, so you see, thank you, coir. It's gone completely crazy, totally nuts. And here's the book. So, I know what you're thinking. I can read your mind. You're thinking, yeah, it's okay for her. She wants this enormous garden where she's going to plant these absolutely crazy things. But A, we don't have that sort of space. And B, I'm sure most of you would say we wouldn't even want it. I mean, who wants to go through all this? But so I would like to extract from my experience of this project something that hopefully you can all take away with you and use it at home. So I'm going to start by saying something that all the perennial and grass lovers, no, nobody, I'm not looking at anyone in particular at all, not at all, will kill me for saying this. But in my experience, 45 years of it, I've come to the conclusion that in small gardens, just filling it with tiny, 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 tiny things that, if it's perennials, usually either don't survive or take over, it's either or, is probably not the best way to get the most out of your gardens. I personally would really implore you to go bold, to be really bold. The smaller the garden, the more inventive, creative, and bold you need to be. You need to have at least 5 plants that say, I'm here for the whole year, I'm a plant for all seasons, and you can look at me throughout the whole year. Whereas, because, let's be honest, between November and April, if you've got just grasses and perennials, what are you looking at? Not a lot. And in January, when most people want to commit suicide, you really do want to you really want to look at something that gives you joy and says, no matter what the weather does out there, I'm here for you. So, if you will have me again, I will make a little list of all the interesting things you could have that are so easy. Once you've planted them, you forget about them. And they're there for you to admire and look at throughout the year. So that's one thing I would like to bring to the table. The other thing is the use of coir, of course. And recycling. Recycle everything. I mean, we all know gardening is not a cheap hobby, is it? So having to import tons and tons, and even if you don't have the difficulty of access that I have, tons and tons and tons of earth and compost and all that. If you could, have a little shredder and recycle as much as you can, and the leaves, the dead leaves now, your grass clippings, they're all, grist to the mill, and you can use them, just chuck them over your borders. And the other thing you can do if you've got pesky weeds, which we all do, is to use, thank you Amazon, take the labels off, brown cardboard to put on top of in order to smother the weeds. And then it dissolves and becomes also part of the, the material, the earth. And so that it doesn't fly away, you can put other organic matters on top. All the perennials you cut them small, put them on top. It doesn't have to go through the compost. You could put them straight onto the earth. So that's another thing I would like to bring to the table. And yes, go for it, be bold. And if you're interested in the crazy things I grow, I'm very happy, free of charge, to come back and you know, show you a list of what I grow and where to find them. So if you're interested in the book, here it is, only £8, and it would be lovely to see you in my garden. Apart from the June thing, I open in aid of the NGS, the National Garden Scheme, for groups of 5 and more. So if any of you would like to organize something like that, I would be delighted to welcome you there. And apart from that, thank you for listening.
Mona, you would be happy to answer questions?
Oh, yes. Bring them on. Silence.
Well, I would just like to say, before we get on to questions, if there are any, that I remember now coming to your garden in 2022, and you just acquired that piece of land. And in fact, you told me that the bottom half of the existing garden you got from next door anyway. So you started off with a long, thin garden that had already been expanded once into someone else's bottom now?
No, that's my
Okay.
new extension.
Okay.
No, the other I did have.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, but you were probably one of the very first people to see the new acquisition in the terrible state it was in.
I don't think we actually saw it. I think we looked over
Yeah,
the
because
fence.
it was in such a well, so you couldn't. It was impenetrable.
Yeah.
You could,
Any questions? Yes, Juliet.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mona. That was absolutely fabulous.
Oh, well, thank you.
I'm not sure I can wait till you come back to hear about your recommended plants.
So
So you
okay.
said something about 5 plants that are striking and easy and do something all year round. Would you care to name at least 5 of
Absolutely.
them?
Where is your garden?
Just round the corner.
Just round the corner.
Yeah.
Okay. London is a microclimate.
Right.
You can grow so many things, because I don't know about you, but -5 occasionally, and that's about it. So not just my Corokias, who come in all shapes and forms. At the moment, the passion of the moment, I love palms. And you don't have to have, you know, an exotic place, because in my existing garden, I mix them up with all sorts of things. So Trachycarpus is one of them, and it's very easily obtainable.
Yeah.
Dare I say it, despite my misadventure, a little olive tree, because it can be pruned, you see. And of course, my big speciality are New Zealand plants. So forget Corokia, because they are lovely, because you know they are a perfect alternative to box, and you can have them as large specimen plants, and then you can shape them. That's the other thing. If you've got a bold plant that is there forever, you can have quite a few that you can tame. I mean, olive trees can be shaped. And of course, there are, not those awful affairs that had to be felled, but there are some lovely conifers. You know, things like,
Pinus mugo, you know?
yes, Pinus mugo, or Juniperus Skyrocket. I'm in my, if you like, design combination. I like the combination between the blue-gray glaucus and the purple. Or lovely things that have beautiful bark, because when the flower grows, one of my great things and my great passions is, oh God, it's an impossible name, Lagerstromeria. The common name is Crape Myrtle. The flowers are lovely, but they're rather insignificant. But when they come, when we have a good summer, they come in white or fuchsia or violet. But it's the bark that's absolutely super. And the other one, where you can lift the bark and it's all cinnamon. So you cut it down, is myrtle,
Yeah.
Luma apiculata. It's, and in all the gardens, all the plants I'm telling you about, you can find in all the, everywhere in the West Country. These are planted en masse. And my, last but not least, my greatest favorite of all, and you can find them in Cruise Hill, Clock House, but also so many nurseries, and they deliver from Cornwall, will deliver, is Pseudopanax. Pseudopanax is amazing. It's architectural, in your face. It grows by 1 foot a year. And you've got 6 or 7 different fabulous, I've got 13 different varieties. Absolutely fabulous things. I'm totally, besotted with them. So off the top of my head, I also have things called olearias, which come in all shapes and sizes. Ebis, that's another one. But they don't grow too big. They're not as flashy as the ones. And I'm sure, just, you know what? You need to come. And we need to do a tour.
Yes.
So, I don't care that it's February. I didn't bring my cards. I didn't bring, forget the group, just come. I didn't bring a card.
Okay.
But
Your website's
ask Johnny. Yeah, that's my
Where
website.
find you if I go
That's
there,
my
yeah?
website. And my email is monaaboud@hotmail.com.
Okay.
So,
Mona Abboud, all one word?
yes, ABBOUD @hotmail.com. And just come, even now, because you will see that even if it's February, it's a garden for all seasons.
Yeah.
What you see there, 90% you will see in May. So, and then I could give you a list as long as you're on.
Thank you very much.
It will be blood pressure.
I'm just interested in how you came to be doing this. Are you a trained gardener? Did you just
Absolutely
teach
not.
yourself? Did you?
No,
what
I'm a
help have you
classical
had?
singer.
Well, that obviously goes together. How much help do you have in thinking about the plants, or have you just learned over 25 years?
A bit of that. My father was passionate, but I mean, no imagination, poor darling, and very, even in Iran, I mean, in the Lebanon, he was growing hydrangeas and begonias. Really? Seriously? But then he had this absolutely huge farm where he grew everything from lemons to almonds to olives to etc. And I mean, he was passionate, but what he did was not my thing, really. So I acquired an olive grove in the south of France, and I had a garden in a house in the south of France. So it started all Mediterranean because, I'm half Lebanese, I lived in the south of France and in Italy, and that was my big thing, Mediterranean plants. And then I went to Australia and came back all passionate, and I have a friend in Suffolk, and I was telling her all about these wonderful Australian plants I saw. And she said, well, the climate here, maybe the odd one, perhaps. Pittosporum, that's another one.
Yeah.
Big ones, small ones.
Bring the plants from Tasmania, they'll manage.
Yes. So she said, you're better off with New Zealand. And she lives on the North Sea. It's a place near Woodbridge called Shingle Street, battered by wind and salt, etc. And she showed me my first Corokia, which looked like an olive tree, so I was smitten. And then I went to Cornwall and discovered Pseudopanax in the Lost Gardens of Helligan and all that, absolutely amazing New Zealand things. And my then gardener, Lady Gardener, said to me, there is this chap in Essex who absolutely, he's been in New Zealand 5 times, he's got loads of Corokias, we should go. So off we went. Well, I mean, that's the subject of my first book called Corokia, My Adventure. There was this 1930s bungalow and this Wurzel Gummidge character in a singlet vest in his 80s. Not at all welcoming. I didn't even get a glass of water, forget that. And you couldn't have found your grandmother in there, it was such a mess. But he had such interesting plants. Bottle brush.
Oh, yes.
So he wouldn't part with anything. He kept saying, oh, but it's for trade, it's for trade, it's for trade. So I said to him, but look, I mean, why did I come here? So I extracted a few from him. I went back a few years later, same thing, it's for trade, it's for trade, it's for trade. And I got really fit. I mean, you know, it was like a battle of wills. It was like drawing teeth, really, with this man. He let me have 3-4 more things, which are still doing well. And from where he is, because unfortunately he died in 2012, he must be thanking me because his grandson, who took over, lost the whole collection he left behind. All of it, just about, in that infamous 22-23, because he had to move the whole collection to Hampshire. They had the worst winter ever. Even in polytunnels, everything perished. So thank God I had extracted, you know. And the whole Corokia thing was even more ridiculous because, you know, I had found this Corokia in Suffolk, battered by the winds, etc. Saw a few more in Cornwall, and a few more I extracted from Mr. Wurzel Gummidge, who, by the way, proved to be the greatest New Zealand pioneer ever. He's called Graham Hutchins. I dedicated my first book to his memory after all that. When the poor man passed away, I went to see his grandson, who had taken over, and I said, oh, I would like a few more Corokias and a few more New Zealand plants that you have here. Oh, it's for trade. I said, no, don't you start. I had a belly full with your grandfather, so come on. I mean, show some heart. I mean, I've been trying for 6 years, nothing doing. So eventually, and I really, honestly, hand on heart, didn't think it was going to work. I tried
visualizing you climbing over the fence in the dark.
Blackmail, dear. Much worse than that. I tried a bit of blackmail. The blackmail boomeranged back. The blackmail was, oh, Paul, surely you can let me have them because I'm going to have the National Collection of Corokia. Oh, are you? Yes, I am. I wasn't going to at all. No way. And I said, then anyway, your grandfather bred them, he had them all, why didn't he have a national collection of Corokia? And he said, oh, he was too mean to pay the £26 a year to Plant Heritage. So I said, oh, well, this loss is my game. But I had no intention. It was just blackmail. I didn't think the blackmail would work either. So next time I went, he had 8 or 9 different varieties. I said, come on. I'll sell them to you. National collection, of course. I'll let you have them. On the way back, guilt, absolute abject guilt. I thought, what have I done? That lovely man. Oh, wow. So, after a few weeks of reflection, I thought, well, I've already got 2/3 of what's available. I might as well carry on with this. So I rang a few places, and then, this is the subject of my first book, it took me to all the places that Graham had lost them, but had them in RHS, Rosemore RHS, Wisley RHS, Hyde Hall, and even the Botanic and the Jardin Botanique and Exotique in Roscoff. I even went there. I even went to Holland to get some that were called Welsh whiskey. I mean, God, it was quite a, yeah. So, yeah. So And for me, New Zealand plants, I've never been, I probably never will, because at my age, 24 hours in a plane, I don't think so. But for me, it was the natural progression from Mediterranean plants, you know, evergreens, very interesting foliage. I've got some really interesting ones for you called Casimir Blue Grey, I mean, absolutely stunning. And you can find them here. And that's why also I wrote the book, because I got so fed up with visitors coming and saying, oh, it's not an English garden. I said, well, first of all, you know, I'm doing native plants. I said, well, lucky, good for you. There's probably only 50 species of native plants. In everything else comes from somewhere else. I mean, talk about mass, you know, everything nobody wants now. Mass immigration. I mean, all our gardens are the result of mass immigration. I mean, where does roses come from originally? Can somebody tell me?
Persia.
Tulips?
No, east of that.
Turkey.
Central Asia, yeah.
So, I mean, everything we all love comes from somewhere else. Camellias, rhododendrons, etc., etc. So I say to them, it's your forebears, not mine, who risked life and limb to go to South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and get these plants back. So the least you could do is give them a whirl, you know, now that they're available. And it's true. These poor people, scurvy, death, I mean, they were killed by the Maoris. I mean, I wrote a historic chapter about all these amazing pioneers. So I think we owe it to them to give it a whirl. It was a very long answer, sorry.
Although I'm still disappointed you didn't cover the fence of the dark.
I know. Well, I've done other naughty things over the fence in the dark.
Do you spend most of every day gardening?
Just about, yeah. Winter, summer, etc. At the moment, it's bashing bricks and cutting back. I mean, I know they say, and dear Johnny would kill me. You know, you're not supposed to cut down grasses before the beginning of March, etc. But I mean, below the architectural whatever, they're messy, you know, when they've. So I'm cutting because I'm cutting them now, so that I cut them small and I put them on top of the famous cardboards to block the weeds. You see. So now is the time. Shredding. Well, it never ends.
And how many people do you have to help you?
2
Okay.
now, because at first I only had 1, but now that I have 2 gardens,
Yeah.
but I work with them, like digging, pulling, and everything. The only thing I don't do is if I literally can't reach, and even then I try it on the 4-meter ladder, etc. But yeah, I do 70% of the work, and I work with them, which is very annoying to them because. But yeah, no, but I like it. It's teamwork. And
But are you going to expand the garden anymore?
well, no. Well, the thing I didn't tell
may
you.
not be able to help
The
yourself.
thing I didn't tell you. In the book. That's a caveat in the book because it's not true anymore. I did all that because I was going to leave both my gardens to the charity Perennial. And I decided just before Christmas against it. I didn't think they were the right fit for me, for my garden. I didn't think they would look after it in the way that. So I'm going to go down the standalone charity route, which I think is. So I'm writing a garden manual for people who are going to take over from me, with a list of all the plants.
Do you know who will take over?
My gardener. So I'm training him, poor man.
Is this what Dix to do, for instance?
Yes.
Yes, and trustees.
Yes, exactly. That whole thing. That whole thing. Yeah. Because then you know.
Yes.
And you know that because they asked also for a huge endowment, which is fair enough, but I didn't think the endowment was going to go anywhere near my garden. I think it was going to, you know, like dear Rachel Reeves, it was going to go plugging their gaping hole, their own hole. And so, no, I mean, because you have no, once you've given it, you have no control. I mean, you can write a thing and do a memorandum and say you want this, that, and the other, but who's going to sue them if they're not going to do it properly? So I decided against it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.